Hi there, this is Amar Brunet with QBrush.com. In this chapter, we're going to be starting up a project with a skeleton. So this is going to be the skeleton for a character. This is very important because it will dictate the proportions, the size of the character, so the proportions of all the limbs and the body and everything. And also, this is when we'll be setting up the pose for our character. So as you can see here, what I have is kind of like a genderless skeleton. So, as you can tell from most skeletons, it's kind of hard to say if it was a male or a female. You can kind of tell with the build, the general build of it. If it was a little bit smaller compared to a bigger one, you can probably guess it's a female, because in general it's a little bit smaller, and maybe the hips are going to be a little bit wider, like the pelvis is going to be a little bit wider, but in general it's very, very close. And so this is why this phase is going to be also very close, because they're almost the same. So there are many ways to go about doing something like this, and different people use different skeletons. In my case, I like this one because this one is very simple to do. It doesn't take long, and it's easy. And if I don't like it, I can iterate really, really fast. So you could go, you could push this a lot more, maybe add like all the muscle groups and all that kind of stuff. But and for what I want to achieve here, which is just like a solid pose and good proportions, I don't need more than this. So over the years, my skeletons changed a little bit. Like the size of this here, the pelvis changed a little bit. At some point, it was more like a box. At some other point, it was more something like a triangle, almost like something like this. You do really whatever you want. But in this case, what I've come down to, so this one here in particular, I think resembles a real skeleton as much as possible, with still giving me a lot of liberties to sort of play with the style. So so as you can see, not much here. So we're gonna go over all the different things here and see how this was built. So the first thing that we want to do is work on the head, because the head is going to be directing the size, or not the size, the height of the character. So if we have a head like this, like we have on the other side, and I take this and try to see how tall this character is, and generally you'll want to go for something like 7 heads tall. So that's pretty much what we're at right now. So and this is a good size. So some characters will go down to 6, maybe go up to 8. I mean, it can go even beyond that, like 8, 9, 10 heads high. There's many different types of people in the world, so I'm sure any size will fit somebody. But generally speaking, when you want to go for something that's kind of like average, I go for 6 or 7 heads. So 7 is generally more like a sort of like a superhero height, so that's what I go for. And so when you have the heads, let's go back here. When you have your head done, and pretty much the size of your character, so you can kind of guess, so he's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 comes down to about here. Now we can really fill in that gap. So we want to make something happen here. So what I do, I'll go step by step. The first thing is to create the neck after this. So I have the neck, and the neck seems a little bit long in this case, but it's gonna fill up at some point, so don't worry about it. And what I want it to be is about half the size of the head itself. So the head is kind of like this egg shape, and I want to take half and then do pretty much the other half on the other side, and that's going to be the length of the neck. And after that, I want to go and trace a line, and that's going to be sort of like my shoulder level, basically, and then create the joint for the shoulders. And as you can see, the neck will connect to that. And then after this, we have sort of the torso area, which is this other egg shape And so let me stop here and I'll explain a little bit more. So the neck here seems a little bit too long, right? But we have the shoulders here, and we're gonna have the trap muscles kind of like join this and fill in the gap. So, you know, don't freak out if it looks a little bit long now. All work out in the end. And so yeah, so for the width of the shoulders, generally what I do is I take 2 sizes the width of the head. So let's say something like this and like that, and that would be, you know, the width of the shoulders. So of course, you know, if you're working with a male and you want him to be really, really buff, then you'll go wider than that. Or if you want like a female to look really, really frail, or a male to look really frail, whatever, you know, you can play with the width. But like I said, I'm working on like an average character, so this is what I want to go for. And then so I have the torso here, and then that's going to be kind of like the rib cage representation, and then I have a sphere, which is going to be the abdomen, and this is going to be the main point of rotation for the upper body. And after that, for the hips, I have kind of like this heart shape, and that represents, you know, pretty well what the pelvis is. So you draw this like this big heart that's a little bit wider than the rib cage, and once you're done with that, you know, when at the tip of the heart here, you should be pretty close to like almost halfway, you know, if you take the complete height. Let's see what this comes out. So you're about right here. So this is almost halfway. So this is what, you know, if you're somewhere around here, sometimes, you know, your leg's gonna be a little bit taller, a little bit shorter, you know, depending. But you want to be in this area here. So about at the halfway point of the total height of your character. So generally it's going to be a little bit lower than that. So this is what I go with, you know, as a general guide. And then once you're done with the heart, we're gonna have the leg joint that starts not quite flush with the sides of the heart here, but just a little bit outside of that for females. For males, it's going to be a little bit closer. So I'm exaggerating right now. It's probably not as wide as that, but you know, for males, it would be something like this, because the hips don't need to be as wide because they don't need to carry babies. So yeah, for females, it's something like this. And then I'm gonna go back up to the arms. And the arms, very simple. So to do the whole thing, you have the first joint here, which is the elbow joint, that comes at about you know, the belly button level. So somewhere around the abdomen here would be a good length or a good place for that joint here. And then you take the exact same distance and you create another dot, another circle, and that's going to be the wrist. And then you take this distance here and you take about like 2/3 of it, and that's going to be where the distance that you need to add on the other side to create, you know, to have the hand be, you know, the proper size. So something like this will be pretty good. And then all you have to do is connect the little dots. Do the same thing on the other side, and you can see, you know, creating those circles is very simple, obviously. And that's what's great about this, because when you're going to be posing this, you don't want to have like all the, you know, all the different muscles and all this stuff to worry about. If you're only you know, placing like these really simple cylinders in the 3D space or in perspective, it makes it really simple to do that. And then yeah, moving on to the legs. So it's gonna be the same deal here. So about halfway. It's not, you know, in real life it's not exactly halfway. So if you look at it in real life, that's pretty much the same thing, right? Look, this is at an angle, but you know, the distances from here to here is pretty much the same. So that's what I generally go with, and that means that we can, you know, take this distance here and go like halfway, and that's going to be our knee. And then the same thing with the ankle. Connect the dots, and we're pretty much done. And then with the feet, you know, do something like a triangle or something like that. Don't need to go too fancy here. But yeah, so now we have a character that's pretty much done. And so with the abdomen here that I did before, there was something that I wanted to say also. this is pretty much the place where everything's going to rotate from. So imagine you do this, and that's going to be the point of rotation for all the torso. So you know that you're going to rotate around that, either the top of the body or the bottom of the lower part of the body. You're not gonna rotate here, for example, right? The rib cage is never gonna break like that. This sphere is a good indication where where you can rotate things. So what's important to know at this point is that all those relations between the distances of the limbs and the joints, this all works if you're looking at the character from the front in a relaxed pose like this. So obviously if you're putting the character in a different pose where there are suddenly different perspectives going on, then it's not gonna work, or it's gonna work but you'll have to consider that. So let's imagine we have, well, let's not imagine, actually let's actually do it. So let's say you have this same character here that's in a different perspective. So change that. So now you could think that we're looking at this character from the bottom, and now the distance is suddenly slightly different. So like this used to be the same, now it's not, and this used to be the same, now it's not. So those are all things that you need to take into consideration when you're playing with perspective, and that's the biggest challenge with perspective, is to try to maintain those same ratios, those same relations between different limbs and between joints and between shapes, basically, and have them still make sense when you're looking at them at different angles. So here this looks obviously fine because we deformed it as a whole, but if you were to draw this, that might be something different. It's a little bit more challenging, and yeah, perspective's never easy. And now we're going to do a character, but from the side view. So from the side view, it's going to be slightly different. The skeleton will need one more thing, and that's the spine, because the spine helps a lot actually to see it. So in this case, if I were to draw the spine, well, it would be just this straight line, because the character we're looking at it from the front, and the front view of a spine is pretty simple, it's just a line. But from the side, suddenly it becomes more like this. So this kind of really like soft S shape, and here is where the head would connect, and here would be like the hips. So let's go over this in a little bit more details. So if we take this same character here and we look at it from the side view, so we'll have still the initial shape for the head, and then we have sort of the jaw that we attach to that. So the nose, something like this. I have a little bit small, so let's make it a little bit bigger to match that. That looks about right. And so now you could draw the neck, but from this side view, suddenly it's always a little bit harder to figure out where the neck goes. Is it here? No. Here? Yeah, ish. So when you have the spine, when you know where the spine connects, it's a lot easier suddenly. So the spine really is connected at the sort of the intersection of between the jaw and the back of the skull. So it's right here. So this is where it connects. So you can just draw like this big S, and the tip of the S is going to be basically in the crotch area. So it's going to be halfway, like we said. If you have this is the height of the character, and this is the sort of the halfway mark where the crotch should be. The tip of the S is going to land there, basically. So we draw this really soft S again. And you can emphasize it a little bit more just for the sake of this. So this is this is pretty much what the spine would look like. So from there, it's a lot easier. So now we can, the shoulders, depending if they're pushed back or hunched forward, this can really be anywhere you want. Not here obviously, but within this zone here. So we'll just kind of put them right there. And again, we have the neck here. So we take we cut the head in half, and then we had that distance underneath here. So That would be sort of like that would be the length of the neck. So you can see from the side it looks a little bit longer, obviously, because from the front here it was almost at a perspective. So if I were to draw, like, it wasn't straight lines, so there was already a little bit of a perspective going on. Alright, now that I have my shoulder here, I can draw on top. I use this line as kind of like the neckline, so you would think, you know, you have this like this. So it's a good indication for those bones. And also it's a good indication to know when to start the rib cage. So in this case, you know, the rib cage starts right underneath. So it would be something like this. And now you can see that the all the shapes that I'm drawing are kind of resting on that spine curve. So it's not going through it, so the abdomen's not going to go through it like this. It kind of rests on it. So yeah, this is really like the back curve. It's the spine, but also it's basically the curve of your back. And if I have the pelvis here from the side, it's going to look more like a stretched circle, you know, more than a heart like it did in the front view. And so yeah, that would be a character from the side, at least the abdomen area, the torso, upper body area. I'm gonna have the butt here, of course, but we're not gonna do that just yet. Now we're just gonna finish with our joints, our limbs. So we have the knees, then ankle, and then we have the shoulder right here. So we're gonna push this arm back a little bit, something like that. Connect the dots, and we're pretty much done. So we need to add feet, I guess. We need to add a foot. So simple triangle, that's gonna do it. And let me adjust the neck here because it's a little bit too long. Something like that. Yeah, that's much better. All right, so yeah, this is looking pretty good. So if you were to, you know, imagine this guy from the side view, that would be pretty much what this is. So this obviously does not look complete. It's missing some important things. So we can add the butt cheeks here, something like that, and then add maybe a little bit of muscles to that leg. So from the side, very simple line. So you just have like the calf like this, and then the line connects to go and make the quads in front. So something like this, and that already looks a lot better. So now that we have our character pretty much done from the side view, let's try to pose this. When drawing poses, what's really important, besides obviously having all the right proportions, is to have a nice flow to your pose. And that means that you should be able to draw a line of action, a really smooth curve, in most cases at least, through your character, and have basically the body follow that curve. So in the case of a character standing straight, well, there wouldn't be much of a curve, right? But if we draw this line of action here that's very obvious, then we're going to try to adapt this character to kind of match it. So you have the straight line here for the shoulders, and let's do something similar for the hips. So in this case, both red lines are perpendicular to that curve. And what that means is that when you have a line of action here, you can actually do the same thing. So let's say we'll have a perpendicular line here, and then down here it would be different. So it would be angled like this. And you can start to see here, let's say we have the head, and then those are the shoulders, and those are the hips, and then, you know, the legs. Now you have a nice curve, and suddenly you can kind of start to see the pose. And if you didn't have that nice curve, the pose wouldn't be as good. Basically, that's what it is. So always make sure that you're able to draw a nice action line, or a nice flowing curve through your pose. If you can't, there's likely a problem. So let's erase that. All right, and then we'll start with a pretty simple pose. So let's go with something kind of like in 3/4, maybe view from the back a little bit. So start something here. So it's very important that we maintain all the same proportions that we came up with initially. So when doing a pose that is not from the front, it's always a good idea to draw the spine first so that you kind of know where or how the body is gonna be angled. And the spine is a very good indicator or a very good base reference for the main curve of the pose that we just talked about. So generally that, you know, that action line is going to follow the spine in most cases. Alright, something like this. Alright, so as you can see here, the character is seen a little bit from the back. So this is the shoulders. The shoulder line would be something like this. And you have the abdomen right here. And now we're going to draw the hips or the heart in perspective. So that is a little bit more challenging if you want to do a heart. But as I said, you know, you can easily change that shape for maybe a triangle. Maybe a triangle will be a little bit easier. So something like that. And then we have the hip joints. They're kind of like this. So you can already start to see with the angle that I'm choosing here. You know, I'm following those lines and those guides really well. So I have the perpendicular line for the hips that, since, you know, at the bottom of the spine here I get this kind of curve, well, the same thing, the hip's going to follow that curve, so the line is not going to be straight. And now we're going to draw the legs. Let's see. Like this. Other leg, since it's a little bit lower, and this one is, you know, fully stretched and touching the floor or the ground. This one, since the hip starts, or the joint starts a little bit lower, it means that it'll have to be bent a little bit to work. So we're gonna have it go slightly forward, something like this, and then something like that. Alright, so it's twisting a little bit. And then with the arms, we're gonna have one go back like that, and the hand's gonna lay on the hips like this, and the other one, what are we gonna do with that? What are we gonna do with that one? Let's do the same thing. So this one is also going to be in perspective, so the distances are going to change a little bit here, as you can see. So you can imagine that this joint here, the elbow, is a lot closer to the camera than the shoulder is. So if you look at this if we looked at this from the side view, for example, it would be something like this. And the camera, we are looking at it from this angle. So when we go back here, it almost looks like we're looking at it. It almost looks like the arm is straight, but it's not. It's actually bent, just at an angle. So we're gonna have the wrists down here, and then the hand. All right, then let's erase a little bit here. It's starting to get a little bit messy. Okay, all right, so now we have something that's pretty good. So you can trace a nice line here, nice flowing line. And you can see the legs kind of follow that line too, like you have this curve here. So it looks pretty good for now. And that's how I create my poses, basically. So you don't need more than that. You know, everything else, so the breast, like the butt, and all this other stuff can easily be added afterwards. and we're going to do that in the next chapter. But for now, let's do another pose, and then we'll be able to move on. So let's move on that side here. Let's do something a little bit more difficult. So maybe she's from the front. We're looking at her from the front, maybe at a 3/4 angle, and she's leaning forward, something like this. So we're gonna have the head here, something like this, and let's say we're gonna draw the spine again. I really like to lead with the spine because the spine has so much information, and we can just basically draw everything off of the spine once that's set in stone. So I'm gonna have the spine go like this and then curve out. So as you can see here, it's just really bending forward, and the spine line is not complete now because, as we mentioned before, it has to be an S. So regardless of the position, it's always an S. In this case, there's no such thing, so the S is not complete. So it's going to be more like this. So adjust it so that you get an S. Otherwise, it's no good. All right, now we got a nice S. Now we're going to be able to draw everything else. So now let's draw the shoulders. So have the line here. It's going to be our shoulder line. Draw the shoulder joint here. And after that, we have the rib cage that attaches to that spine curve that we drew, and then the abdomen. And since this is at an angle, so you can imagine, we're looking at this. Let's say we draw it from the side view. So from the side, you would have the spine that looks like this. And then what we did is we grabbed that, added perspective to it, and then suddenly it looks like this, right? So this is what we have up here, as you can see, almost perfect match. Meaning that there is some sort of perspective going on, and we have to take that into consideration. So that means that this part here, the sphere here, or the egg shape here for the rib cage, is over the abdomen sphere. So the abdomen sphere is going to be kind of like behind that. So if we erase this, it's going to be something like this. So behind. All right, and then we have the heart shape that we need to draw for this. And the heart is also going to be at an angle. So the tip is going to be right here. Then we have curve like this. And the other one like this. Right, now that we have the legs, we don't want those legs to be straight down or similar to this here, because that would mean that there wouldn't be enough mass sort of balancing the torso out. So if you have the arms on top of that, like something like this, there's just too much weight on the side and she would fall forward. So we have to balance that out, and that means that we have to bring the legs forward a little bit to help her keep her balance, basically. So something like this, and you can draw the feet already. And then the arms going to be resting on her knees. So we can draw the distances just to make sure everything's fine. So we have this distance here, that is good, and then the same thing here, meaning that the wrist is about here. If we do the same thing on the other side, something like that. And then we have the hands sort of leaning, resting on the knee. And we can have the same thing here. So here, obviously you can imagine that the leg would be a little bit thicker than it is right now. So it's fine if it's kind of floating over right now, but you would have, you would have the skin go like this. So it actually works out. And then the hand would be laying something like that, some similar way. And yeah, so there we go. We have another pose. So we just have to connect those dots here to make sure everything's fine. So now that we have a nice skeleton that we are able to work with and pose fairly simply and quickly, now we can actually take this to the next step and add sort of the meat on top of the bones, and to make sure that we push that feminine side even more. So we already have something pretty feminine with the poses that we have here, and now is the time to take that to the next level. So we'll do that in the next